You know, we have been using a lot of the data analytics at the beginning of the fraud investigation or examination. Here's how we see the process. I'm going to answer it two ways. One in a proactive anti-fraud program model, and then one in a reactive investigation model. First, the proactive. Fraud is so big and prevalent in today's organizations, it's impossible to go after it all. You know, I think as you know, the ACFE report to the nation, I think this year was 5%. I think the new report's going to come out and it's probably going to have a similar number, 5% of revenues lost due to fraud. It's too much. I call it boiling the ocean to try to address all of it broadly. So that is why it's key to do a risk assessment, a fraud risk assessment first. And based on that, identify your targeted analytics or targeted tests that address specific fraud risk areas. And based on that, then going in and doing some analytics up front to come up with suspicious vendors, suspicious employees, suspicious transactions, and applying a host of both the rules-based tests and the data mining tests and the text mining tests to really come up with suspicious transactions so that when you do your examination, you do your on-site field work, for example. I call it you have ammunition. You don't show up cold, and you don't show up to your interviews cold. And the same kind of methodology goes with your reactive investigation for CFEs. You don't necessarily have to do as much time on your risk assessment in a reactive mode. You have a hypothesis. You know something's happened, whether it's a whistleblower hotline or some tip-off. You know, it is so true that 50% or more of fraud is detected by tip or by accident, as set forth in your ACFE report to the nation. That's how it mainly comes in. In those reactive situations, you have a hypothesis. Based on that, you can identify, looking at the fraud tree, what tests are most appropriate. And through a combination of rules-based and statistical-based data mining types of techniques, developing the 20 or 30, maybe less, but not 100, 20, 30 targeted tests to meet that specific fraud risk area. Then you are armed for your interview. Other people use a combination of email analysis, depending on the severity. Email is a very common source. And I like to kind of see a fraud investigation because there's three main sources of data to collect. You can collect your unstructured data, which is the email, the documents, et cetera, et cetera. You can collect your structured data, which is from the financial accounting systems, and they overlap a little bit. And then the third circle is your interviews. And I think the ideal fraud investigation, if you want the best tools and the best resources to go in and find that fraud, it's a combination of looking at your unstructured email data, considering your transaction what transaction details, what was the person's travel and expenses policy, did they have access to the books and records, what were the transactions that they made, what were the change logs, did he or she have access to the vendor master? Lots of questions. Gathering all that up and looking at the synchronization of emails, synchronations of disbursements, vendor creations, etc., gives you a ton of ammunition for your interview, which hopefully, if it goes well, would just drive the confession and you're done. But having that information and the facts at your resources is very important. The analytics that I'm seeing and we're uncovering, that other component of the fraud tree called corruption, and especially because of the recent DOJ and SEC enforcements around FCPA, corruption has been a big component of where we're seeing fraud investigations. From a global Fortune 500 perspective, this is where we're seeing a lot of activity. And text mining, more than any other traditional type of fraud tests we're seeing, has been most effective in the corruption space. Some of the stories we're seeing when we see words like in the travel and expense description, when I see the word RSAF, stands for Royal Saudi Air Force. Who are you entertaining? Royal Saudi Air Force in these foreign countries and maybe some of these restricted countries, and you're seeing entertainment, meals, and expenses from this one person. And I see words, like entertainment, customer entertainment, friend fee, gifts, etc. Those texts, the text field descriptions of what I'm seeing in travel and expenses, or in a donation, in charity and gift expenses, when I see gift to General such and such, or gift to Congressman or Senator such and such, or what have you, those text mining techniques, when I can link it to transactions, has been where we're finding a lot of areas for corruption.